My name is Leanne Thibodeau, and actually my question I'd like to direct it to two people, Tom Alexander, and maybe Bruce Northrop would be the other one. I attended, Tom, one of your presentations in Cambridge Narrows last fall, and this goes back to the response we just got from the government side about the protection of the water and having the distance of posting a bond is one of the regulations that was put in place. Well, Mr. Alexander, at that meeting in Cambridge Narrows, you went through those 3 points and you said you hadn't agreed to the bond. So I'm asking Mr. Northrop, is this regulation actually in place? Because Mr. Alexander, you said you hadn't agreed to that regulation. So where does it sit? Is the regulation there or not?
That's a really tough question, because Mark just finished reading the regulations that have been introduced by the government, and if you recall, I believe number 4 related specifically to that bond. So Mr. Alexander, according to, it's Leanne? Yeah. According to Leanne, basically said that he had not agreed to that. So we're getting some misinformation here, it would seem. So, Mark, would you like to have a few seconds to think about that? Yeah? Okay. What about the negative side? Do we have anything to offer on this side with respect to that particular question? Okay, Jim will make an attempt.
Probably don't even have to start the machine on this one. Essentially, we're still all in the dark about what the proposed regulations will be. Last year when they said, last June when they first said they had new regulations out for seismic testing, and people were concerned about water problems in their wells from seismic testing. You may remember there was a big rally down here at the hotel where they were having a meeting. Mr. Northrop came out and said, oh, it's okay, we have these great new regulations. Well, out in Taymouth, we were in the process of being seismically tested. So we were really interested in that. So after months, literally months, of back and forth between the department about, like, where are these new regulations? What do they say? Because, the guys are knocking on our door. We want to do something about it. Well, finally in a meeting, actually it was the very same day as the infamous Stanley blockade, we had a meeting face-to-face with the environmental people from the Department of the Health Department of Environment, and they said, well, actually these are proposed regulations, that they don't have the force of law behind them yet until the legislature meets, and secondly, because SWIN signed their contract before we propose these regulations, they won't apply to you. So just an anecdotal tale of what it means until you actually see ink on paper. Basically, not much.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I believe, Mark, you ready for your rebuttal?
I'll be using a story from August 12, 2011 in the Daily Gleaner entitled "Government Not Backing Away from Shale Gas Exploration," where it talks about SWIN. And our Minister, Bruce Northrop, is stated as saying that while no companies are bound by new rules the province is developing, SWIN Resources Canada has agreed to abide by the regulations even before the government creates them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Do we have another question?
I have one question.
Could you identify yourself, sir?
Nobody knows.
Pain in the butt from Fredericton. Charles LeBlanc from Fredericton. I got a question for the government. what are they going to do? What do they have planned when the perfect storms hits Kent County, when the natives and the Acadiens and the English get together and battle these big industries of shale gas? That's my question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Again, Mark, I think, is doing his research. He's becoming a librarian this evening. So I think perhaps I should ask somebody from the negative side to respond to that.
I think those three groups have already come together, and I don't think you can draw lines of race, ethnicity, cultures. We tend to inhabit the province, even though we sometimes try to divide ourselves up. We tend to have the same understandings of what we want for the province, what we want to do, and those of us who are coming together in this fight tend to be those people who respect each other and respect the land rights, water rights, our clean air, what we want for each other. I don't know what the government's response will be as we continue to fight this. If there were a way to get this government out of office, that would be my preference. Nothing written into legislation, I guess, that allows us to do that. I also, along with Jean-Louis, have taught social control and social justice, and see some other sociologists from STU in the audience. And I guess the one thing that we tend to see is how autocratic and dictatorial our government's becoming. And perhaps at some point, all New Brunswickers will recognize it, because it will take over more than just the shale gas debate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Corinne. I'll ask Mark if he has a rebuttal, and then we can proceed with your question.
During August of last year, when Stanley area residents initiated they had a picnic out on an isolated road, and apparently some of the fracking vehicles, the testing vehicles were held up at both ends. At the time, Premier David Alward refused to meet with the group out in Stanley. And it was a two-day event on a gravel road north of Stanley, and at no time did David Alward go out to speak to those protesters. And I think that will continue to be our response.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I think you found an excellent example to perhaps suggest what the government response might be, but let's leave it at that. Okay. This thing is such a serious issue, and it is so difficult to face on a daily basis, as many people on the panel have for the last couple of years. So you either get mad, or you give up, or you try and find a bit of humor in it to keep you going. And essentially, I'm seeing that this evening, which is good therapy for a lot of the people in the room. So thank you. So could you please state your question, your name, and ask your question?
Hello, my name is Shawnee Main. I'm a resident of the city of Fredericton, and I'm a mom to a great 4-year-old, and I kind of wish he was here tonight, because I think the innocence of children, he'd be standing beside me saying, "Mommy, where are all those people?" I believe we're at a crossroads in our North American society, and it's starting to pervade every aspect of our lives. I believe that large corporations have literally come in and taken away our voices. Water is the very thing that we need to survive on this planet, and It's not a debatable issue. It's not a landowner issue. It's not a municipal issue. It's an issue of every living, breathing person that lives on the land where the water is located. So having said that, I'm here for my son tonight and for the rest of New Brunswickers, and I hope that people need to start realizing that these debates are great. I'm happy we're here. They're not being represented, so I think we need to stand up and maybe start showing up in some places where these people don't want us and question them, just like Charles does with his blog camera. Anyway, I'll get to my question. I'm a first responder. I can't say I represent all firefighters and first responders in the province, but I can say that as a first responder, there are times where we are going to be dealing with these liquids. Whether a truck accident, a truck rolls over, the liquids are spilled, or we respond to an explosion at a gas well. Has the government made any public statement as to what's going to be made available to us on MSDS sheets, or I think you know where I'm going with the question.
Okay, thank you for the question. So we have a situation where there's an accident somewhere in the province. As first responders, they have to go and deal with the situation. Some of these chemicals, probably many of them have never seen or encountered. What has the government done to prepare them to respond to situations such as this? That is the question?
Yes, yes it is.
Okay. So, Mark is doing his library research. I think perhaps we have a response from this side.
I don't think we know the answer to that question. When we talk about chemical disclosure, it's one of the topics that comes up most frequently, I'd say. And the response has been, we're working on the regulations for chemical disclosure. I've heard public officials in public situations say we might require the industry to disclose the information to the regulators, but not necessarily to the public. So there's still a lot of questions on what does chemical disclosure actually mean and what level of detail. When I visited Arkansas a year ago, February, I got there just about a week after a pinched pipeline on one of a well pad just outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. And the stories that people are telling me about that specific situation was that the company who was doing the work on that specific project actually prevented the first responders, the public first responders, to come to that site. They wanted to deal with the situation on their own. So the firefighters, the paramedics were actually not allowed to come and respond to that situation. And Theo Colburn, who works for the Endocrine Disruption Exchange, a nonprofit in the US, says that this is a very similar occurrence that she keeps encountering across the US, where employees on the site that work for the industry, the companies on specific projects, are actually told that your first response is actually to call the company emergency number, not 911 or the public response system.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Does the government side have a response?
Quoting from the government's flyer on page 3, most of the chemical additives used are also found in common household products. And also there's concern about drilling muds and flowback wastewater that comes out of the drilling well when they frack. And we, personally, Mark Darcy, I had contacted Department of Environment last month and asked them if they were testing for the presence of radioactive heavy metals. And the answer was no. These are the same drilling muds that are being transported to municipalities. One is Envirene Organics Inc., organic composting facility here in Hannibal Road, Fredericton, where the petroleum contents are biologically decontaminated. So they're not being, these are coming from fracked wells. The shale has naturally occurring radioactive materials everywhere in North America. This includes barium, lead-2010, radium, strontium, thorium, uranium, and their decay products. None of these heavy metals are presently being tested for by Department of Environment or the gas company being required to test for these. These drilling muds are coming by the hundreds of thousands of kilogram loads into cities like Fredericton to be organically composted, and the government may not have any knowledge of where the byproducts are going.
Now that's something that I did not know, and perhaps wish that I didn't hear that. Mr. Brewer, you are up next, but if I could beg your indulgence for just a second, I would like to invite, and I just picked, again randomly, oh, she gave me the red card. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll have Corinne, since she gave me the red card, an opportunity to respond to a particular question. I will then ask the member from the Green Party to give his or her address to the audience, and then we will ask Mr. Brewer to ask his question.
Yes, my red card, my red flag. I just want to respond to the last question because I think that it's important. I don't know what will happen with first responders. I'm glad Stephanie answered that part of it. But I do know that I've done a lot of research on the chemicals. And yes, a lot of those chemicals used in fracking, all 700 different chemicals that can be used in fracking are in many of our products. However, many women are choosing to not use those products in their homes anymore. We don't pour 780 million gallons of Windex or ammonia into our system. If each person did, we'd be in big trouble. So yes, we do have some of those products in our homes, but most of us are trying to get them out. And if you look at your grocery store, your green section is getting bigger, and those sections are becoming smaller. I also want to just suggest that if you are wondering what those fluids are and how they may affect you, we don't know how they affect each other in combination. We only know what the results are when one fluid is tested, one chemical is tested. Remember, my mother-in-law told me when I first got married, she said, when you're cleaning your bathroom, never clean with ammonia and vinegar and alcohol together. She said, you will put your eyeballs out, literally. And forgetting that, I almost did put my eyeballs out because of the fumes of those. So we don't know in combination what happens when those chemicals are mixed. We only test for one chemical at a time. You can go to RPC up the hill and they can do a toxicology report. But the United States House of Representatives Committee on Energy and Commerce did a report in April of 2011, and it has 780 chemicals that have been used in fracking and has them listed by toxicology report. And this was actually done by the Committee on Energy and Commerce. Right? This wasn't done by an environmental committee. This was done by a committee thinking they might find some positive things. It's a good report, and if you want the link, I can easily send it to you.
Thank you, Corinne. So the government side has given me a red flag, and you will be responding to Corinne's comments.
I just think it's important to outline the government position from the natural gas group website. Government will require companies to provide full disclosure of all proposed and actual contents of any fluids, additives, and chemicals used in the hydraulic fracturing process. And but just recently, in April of this year upon request from citizens to Department of the Environment. They asked for the list of what chemicals and radioactive elements were being tested for, as well as any test results. And this is during the fracking process. They were refused. So no list of the chemicals or radioactive elements tested were provided, and there were no test results provided either. And that's April of this year from Department of Environment.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So I would like to ask Louise Como. Yes, please. This is a better microphone, I believe, to address the folks in the audience.
Well, thank you. Green Party's position, I wanted to kind of take you a little bit up to the global level just for a few moments. I wanted to talk global and then provincial and then local. Our position is that the time has well passed where we should be allowing any fossil fuel development at all from a climate change perspective. We are now well beyond immoral into almost the criminal when we support any kind of having been a climate change campaigner for 20 years, I made that fatal mistake of thinking that a transition to natural gas was an appropriate thing to do. So we are well beyond any of that. No is the answer. And climate change is a serious issue for New Brunswick. And if you think intense rain is something you're seeing now, you just wait for it to come. So that's a serious issue for us. At a provincial level, our position is that we can't build a sustainable future for New Brunswick on destruction and an economic policy based on resource extraction. We've got to move to a much more sustainable economic development strategy that's built on renewables and efficiency and innovation and creativity and reskilling our population so that we are more self-sufficient and create opportunities for ourselves here, not necessarily through dependence on exports like shale gas. At a local level, our position is that, first of all, rural communities in New Brunswick are not disposable. And that there's inherent value there that needs to be protected that has nothing to do with resources, but with quality of life and a value that is too important to sacrifice to whether it's shale gas or the next thing. So I wanted to say two things that I think that we need to think about in terms of activism or things that we can do. And Monday's municipal election is pretty important. To the degree that you can be finding out who the greenest person is running in your ward, please vote for a green person. The other thing is to really pay attention to what the government is proposing around government reform. Local communities should have the right to choose what development happens in their community, and that's not yet proposed in the government's plans for local government reform, and there's a major opportunity because shale gas is just one example of any number of things that could come your way. So you should be fighting for the right to choose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. That was the position from the Green Party. By the way, the organizing committee asked all of the political parties, or gave the opportunity to all the political parties to address the audience tonight. And we will have the NDP's position very shortly. We did not get a response from either the Conservatives or the Liberals, to my knowledge. Mr. Brewer, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. My first comments here are to Mark Darcy's government over here. No disrespect intended, Mark, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I attended the Andrews Initiative reports up at the Wool Conference Center, the special speakers that came in. I'll give you a couple comments. One of them said, Mark de Villers, the Germany have purchased subdivision and plowed them under to produce wetlands to purify the Rhine River. He would not trust companies who are fracking safely, even if I was standing on top of them. Kim Sturgis said the future demands for clean water will outstrip our current capacity to provide it. We must protect our water we have and do not put our clean water in jeopardy. In the coming years, Canada is going to produce more food than any other place in the world because we have the availability of water to grow food. And people here tonight, you're being heard around the world because Maud presented her views at the Catholic Registry. The Vatican Council has declared water as a human right, not for-profit commodity. Now, my question here is for Mark O'Connell. There's nothing down or no measures taking place. What are they going to do with this wastewater? We were told you can't decontaminate it when it comes up out of the ground. Is this true, Mark?
Okay, Mark, you have a very powerful voice. It's been suggested that perhaps you could measure the distance from your mouth to the microphone so that it doesn't resonate so loudly. If you would say that.
Okay, thank you, John. I'll put it way over here then. As far as I know, there's no credible way to deal with the wastewaters from the decompressing of fracked wells. There's just is no way to deal with it. It's going to get into our hydrological society or cycle, regardless of what happens. So it's an extraordinarily huge problem. We've also don't have hydrogeological maps of this province. There are a number of people like Dr. Rutenberg in Sussex who have been pushing for that for years, but we just don't have adequate information about our hydrogeology to be able to, how can I say, mount these nefarious practices.
Okay, that was very good, I believe. There's another question on the way, that's very good. I was perhaps going to ask if Mark had, wanted to take this opportunity to represent the government side on this particular question. It's an important question.
In questions recently in the legislature directed to Bruce Northrop, he said that they have not come forward with the regulations yet, and those regulations would address the disposal of wastewaters. When asked, this is Cheryl Norad, Purple Violet Press. She videotaped recently the Environment Local Government Minister, Bruce Fitch, and was asked a direct question about if they were open to deep well injection for the disposal of the wastewater. And Bruce Fitch basically said that they were considering lifting the ban, but it would be addressed in the regulations. So our government's position is that we may be open to deep well injection. That certainly, well, we have to wait for the regulations. At this point, Bruce Fitch said that it would be in the form of not regulations, but a white paper that would be released by the government. And the white paper would outline reports and the government's position. It wouldn't have any, it's not legislation or anything.
Okay, thank you, Mark.